My maiden name's Huffington, and most people don't know my dad, but most people knew my uncle, Jack Huffington. And if you knew him, he was a sneaky SOB. He would ask you a delicate question that sounded very innocent, and the next thing you know, you're sunk eyeballs deep in a problem. And that's what he did to me. He came to me and asked, probably 96, 97, how many cemeteries are there in Clark County? And I had already been in the library, genealogy library, and I said, well, they've got a list of 64. He goes, no. How many places are people buried? I want you to find out, kid. Let me know. Okay. He died several years ago, and I'm still finding them. So this is all kind of his fault. His daughters get a big kick out of every time I post something about finding a cemetery, or I had to go to one to do something. Like, yeah, you know, Dad's still laughing at you. Yeah, I know. So that's how I got into it. It's all his fault. The not finished product is that map. So when this is over, if you want to come up, that's got all but the last 4 that I found marked on it. Mainly because my notes on the last 4 are buried in a box with all the stuff that came from the old building to our house where the new office is, and I still can't get to that box. So the last 4 are not on there. I think I can safely say I know of 164 known burial locations. Not all of them are still visitable, if that's a word, because several of them, more than several, I think I've recently counted up 20 some, have been destroyed and have gone missing over the years. What I did do for this was try to get some pictures together of a few that have more interesting things, people in them. I'll start with Westfield Township. This is in the middle of the residential part of town in Westfield. This is what the old Methodist cemetery looks like now. I've been by there several times over the years. I never took pictures of what it looked like before the people up there finally cleaned it up, cleaned the stones, reset them. It was embarrassing because a lot of the stones were just leaning up, piled along the trees. Now, every stone has been cleaned. You can read almost all of them, and it's a joy to sit and look at it or get out and walk amongst them. If you're ever in Westfield, I'm ashamed to say I did not write the street address down, but take the time to look it up. And it's next to, I think it's now a Baptist church, but take the time to go there and walk amongst these stones. It's fairly large. Not a lot of stones for as many people as what I think are there, but there's some interesting stones, some interesting people, so go visit Westfield. My next one, okay, how many of you have been to Walnut Prairie Cemetery, also known as Brick? Have you ever seen that stone? If you have, do you know what it is and why it's there? Or the story of why it's there? That, as I've been told by I can't tell how many people, including my grandmother, who was, my dad's mother was born in 1896. She told me about this stone, and she grew up in Darwin, and grew, well, if they went to town, they went to Darwin, but when they went and did their other business, they lived on Walnut Prairie, not very far from this, and she's got a lot of family buried there. According to what she's told me and many other people, that is an anchor stone, and it came from probably Darwin. The common themes amongst all the times people's told me this is in the early days of Darwin, there was a lot of flatboat traffic on the river, and slavery was still a thing. And At some point, a flatboat came up the river, and one of their hands on the boat was a slave, and he either died on board or was dying. And slaves' lives didn't have much value then. And they chucked him off the side of the boat into the water. The townspeople fished him out, pulled him up to shore, but God forbid they let the poor man be buried in their precious cemetery right there by the river. Colonel Archer happened to be in town, and he took a great deal of offense to this and had some people load this man's body up in his wagon, told him to put the stone they had him laying next to on the wagon, and he drove down to Walnut Prairie Cemetery, where he had 2 lots, and there's, I don't know how many graves, probably 14 between the 2 lots. He offended a great number of people doing this. If the story's true, he went to work with some friends that sided with him, and they started digging a grave. And some of the people who were a little cranky threw a fit, and grandmother told me that her mother and grandfather had recited through the years. Colonel Archer was a little bit rude about it and said, "I bought this land, I paid for it, and I'll do with it what I damn well please." And so he buried that man there with no name and put that marker, that anchor stone, for headstone. Oddly enough, if I did my research right, I believe he's buried next to Colonel Archer's wife. Not 100% sure on that. He's buried next to an Elizabeth Archer, so I need to look into that, because if I'm going to tell a story, I need to remember it a little bit better, but I'm nervous. There's no proof that that story's true. I've dug and dug and dug in the newspapers, never found anything about it, but it's been recited by too many people and their families for it not to have a kernel of truth. So there's that. It is in the old part, easily walked to by parking on the south side of the old part. Basically where that road curves and goes back south, if you park there and walk straight in, you'll see it. It's just a little bit south of the middle. This one I'm sure a lot of people have seen if you've gone down there. I did not add a picture of the top of it. I've got some friends who commonly call it the dish rag stone. It's a big urn on top of it with a mourning cloth draped over it. And I had to look her name up because I couldn't find it. My dad, who knew he'd have so much foresight, this stone, the story that's carved on it is not legible now. Too many years of weather and erosion, it's just, you can't make it out. Dad took this picture in 1964. I was born in 68, if that tells you how old this slides were great. I wrote down what this says. Emily Corman, wife of Benjamin P. Scott. She died December 18th, 1871, aged 53 years, 3 months, and 8 days. On the night of February 2nd, 1856, in an attempt at robbery of her house, Mrs. Scott received 14 strokes on the head with an iron key bolt of a wagon, each of which broke her skull. From this cause, she had years and periods of insanity, in one of which her clothing caught fire and burned her so that death ensued soon by 5 days. So she took that injury in 1856, and she survived until 1871. And they didn't have brain surgeons back then, nor what kind of medication. So if you can imagine how horrific her recovery must have been. Everybody in our family knows about this stone, and they treat it with more. They almost treat this stone like a good luck charm. Every time my kids are down around that area, they drive to the cemetery. They don't bother going to any of our family stones. They go to her stone and just lay their hand on it. Like, can't even do that for great or third great grandparents, but they'll do that for poor Emily. But like I said, nowadays you can't make out what the words are on her story, and so I thought I would take the time and write it out. Let's see. This is in York Cemetery. I'm ashamed to say I've only been to Ebenezer's grave once when the DAR ladies dragged me there, and they dragged me so many places that day. God's honest truth, I can't tell you where in the cemetery this is. But this was one of the first Revolutionary War veterans buried in Clark County that they were able to honor with the DAR plaque. If you know anyone whose name was Bartlett, not a lot of them are left by the name Bartlett, but they still have descendants left in this area, and they were all descended from him. And this, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, so I'll just keep it short. This is in a field southeast of West Union. As you can see from the stonework, it's not in very good shape. By the time I went back to it, at some point one of the gates had fallen, and I took 2 steps inside and decided this was not for me because groundhogs have made a condominium on the grounds inside, and I stuck my leg in a hole and fell in a patch of poison ivy. So that was not where I needed to be. Since it was most likely the 2nd or 3rd burial site started within Clark County, there's a small group of people that have decided to tackle this, and with a great deal of planning, we're going to work on the fence and get the area inside it cleaned up and at least reset the graves. It deserves that just by virtue of the time period. It was very early. Jonathan McGee, he's one of the earliest burials there, and from the time frame, he and the Handy brothers, Thomas and all of them, they all knew each other. They all lived fairly close together, so they were contemporaries, and the Handy cemetery is fairly well taken care of. This one deserves to be taken care of too. This one, I'm ashamed to say I don't have any current pictures of it. I also, like I need something else to do, I also collect things called RPPCs, which is real picture postcards. And on eBay, I stumbled across this. I think it was around 1917 or thereabouts. There was a tornado that hit Livingston and did a tremendous amount of damage. And that's when this picture was taken. The card had not been used, so I don't know. I don't have a postmark to know for sure, because once again, I was in a hurry putting this together, so I didn't look up the date. But this was taken of the old part of the cemetery on the south side, because let's see, where is he? Right straight up there, you can make out a guy in a white shirt. Right behind him, you can just make out the top of the roof line of the church that's still there. This is in Marshall Cemetery. This is fairly close to what I call the oval. When you first pull into Marshall Cemetery, that very first lane that goes the same direction as the Clarksville Road, if you take that to the left or north, follow almost all the way down where there's that real tight little loop. Just before you get there, there's this marker. I don't know anything about the people, but for years, I liked it because I thought it was pretty. You know, black granite's not very common out there, but it didn't have that ball on top. That ball reappeared 2 years ago, and this story I got was at some point in the past, Marshall teenage boys being what they are, somebody thought it would be funny to take it, and over God knows how many years it ended up in somebody's flower bed as a focal point, and somebody saw it and realized what it was, because there's a tombstone just like that in Clarksville Baptist Cemetery. And questions were asked, and horror expressions were made, and the next thing you know, somebody's got a backhoe, and it was scooped up, washed off, and very gently replaced where it belonged. And I know I was told 2 very strong men tried to pick it up together, and they could not. So I can only imagine what on earth teenage boys, how they got that thing out of there, I will never know, but it's back home where it belongs. If any of you know your Marshall history, I'm sure, let me rephrase that. If any of you know your early Clark County history, because Uri Manley was among the first people to come here, and when it came to forming a government and doing legally stuff, he was your man. And he and his wife are buried side by side. They're in that little loop that I just mentioned. And they have 2 of the prettiest tombstones. There's a lot of beautiful stones out there, but for that age of a stone, that it's still in that good of a condition and still that crisp, is really amazing, and it's worth going out to see. This, I'm sure everybody's familiar with, is the Harlan Vault. From some research I did, I think there's 3 bodies in there. But due to shifting in the ground around it, thank God the door no longer opens. I must have lived a very sheltered life as a teenager, because I had no idea that the thing to do on Halloween was to sneak into Marshall Cemetery and push the vault door open and look at the lady with the long blonde hair. So I'm really glad I didn't have that memory in my head. But like I said, we've had earthquakes over the last 40, 50 years. Thank God nothing major, but enough, plus heavy rains that have caused some shifting in the bricks. That's not all stone. Most of that is limestone or hand-poured, hand-placed cement facing the mausoleum, which is actually formed out of bricks. Those bricks have shifted, and if you look closely at the front of it, there's some cracks. If we ever have another major rainstorm with 9 or 10 inches in a few hours again, I could actually see that thing collapsing. There's already been one in the past that collapsed in. I believe there may well have been a second one that collapsed, but if it's where I think, it was filled in with dirt because the walls were made out of cement, and the family just went to burying their people on the top. But they won't let me go dig on the side of it in the hillside to try to find the door, so I can't prove that.
Well, that's my family, I give you permission.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
I'm serious.
Really, don't tempt me with a good time, because if I could, I would.
I've always wanted to know.
When I walked this cemetery many years ago, because at that time all 3 of the kids were in school, and my youngest is like 23 now. I took my camera with me, and I know I wasn't smart enough to photograph the stones as I went because, I don't know, young and tired. But I did go out later just for relaxation, and I found taking pictures of these different graves that interested me was relaxing, and this is one of my pictures. This one is actually not too far to the east of the Harlan Vault. This is Justin Harlan. I believe he had something to do with the forgive me, this is a major faux pas. I still call it the Moose Building. But Harlan Hall, that was this guy. Just any of the monuments that you see that have a tree like that, they're not usually that big. But they're to indicate the tree of life as a life being cut short. He must have been doing really well for himself at the time, because that would have been a monstrous tree to make and then get stood up without something happening to it. And it's still in very good condition. And I think, no, I didn't. He's got this plaque on the front that's got his name and the death date and how old he was. The plaque on the left side of it is blank. The one on the right side, he was a member of the International Order of Odd Fellows. And a lot of those members also will have a headstone with some form of a log or a tree on it. This, you mentioned Danny acquiring a piece of ground and discovering there's a cemetery on it. My husband's family farmed George and Nancy Moss's ground for 20 years before Jim and I got married, and we got married in '88. They didn't know there was a cemetery on that ground until about 10 years ago. And they farmed right up to the edge of the woods, and one day I just happened to catch George and Brian walking along the edge of the field with a can of gas and a chainsaw, and it's like, why are you doing this? Just going in the woods, because it's not the time of year to cut firewood. We're going to go clean the cemetery up. What cemetery? The one in the woods. Everybody. The Millers, if it's a Monday through a Saturday and they're farming, like shelling, planting, they don't stop, okay? They don't. Everybody stopped and got out and followed them into the woods like and we're amazed because there's at least 22 graves back there, and they had no clue. John Schweitzer was the first person who patented that particular parcel of ground. He died in October of 1851, and he was, I believe, 53 years old. His brother Henry patented a piece of land right next to it, and I'm pretty sure that I found a stone that says Henry Schweitzer, but they spelled it Schweitzer with a C, but there's no dates on it. But there's a woman buried to the left of each one of them, so I'm pretty sure that the brothers and their wives are both in that cemetery. But that one was heavy, and it was laying face down in the dirt. You can see that little ridge. Yeah, I had to kind of work at it and flip it over, wash it off, photograph it, and then to make sure that I was doing things correctly after I was done, I very gently roll it right back where it was. This one I knew about, but I'd never been to it until Beth and Eric Stone nagged on me, dragged me back there. And I realized I'd been told about it, but I'd forgotten about it. These have stone curbs, or they look like stone. They're all hand-poured cement. They're all hollow on the inside. They buried their person, and then they filled the grave in, and then they put these curbs around them. And I'm hoping they filled them in with dirt, because at some point a descendant told me that, oh yeah, there was real thick, heavy plate glass over each one of them. Huh? That kind of creeps me out to think about that, but none of them have headstones. The closest any of them have is two of them, like the one on the left here. There's a rock. That one's a little wider. The other one's got a dark red boulder about that big. Nothing's carved on them that I can see or feel. The glass, if it was there, is broken. And no, I am crazy, but I am not crazy enough to stick my hand in and see if I get cut. I added the picture on the right just to give you an idea how long those graves have been there. That cedar tree is growing inside of a curb for an adult. There's 3 babies. When I say babies, I mean curbs that are they would have been no taller than this. I can comfortably say there's 2 adolescents that were probably about this tall that are buried there, and then the rest are all adults. And I get my directions mixed up, but with God as my witness, those graves are not oriented east and west. They were buried north and south. And I cannot figure out why. The first Tabernacles that I think this was, they came straight over from Germany. You know, some German graves have those curbs. Some of them have glass on them, but they were all oriented east and west. So why, I don't know. Maybe it was tree roots. Who knows? But it's very quiet, pretty cool. Still has a fence around it. And I would go visit it more often, but I don't want to disturb the guy that bow hunts back there. This one may or may not be a burial site. I believe it is, but once again, I am not going to ask the landowner if I can dig, because I don't need that kind of juju in my life. Many years ago, I found out the Black Hawk School in Darwin Township did not always sit out along the road where it did at the end. The 1875 Kaiser map, that's the earliest known land plat map of Clark County, shows the school as being directly south of it, like at the far end of the field. Okay, so my friends put me on a four-wheeler because they said, ain't no way. They took me on a tour of the fields back there, and after seeing the topography, I don't know anybody, not even a druggie, would put a school where that map had it, because all 4 of those fields drain directly across where that would have been. I believe it was at a 45 degree angle. If it was originally here, I believe it was down here where the road, that early in the early 1870s, the road originally came in at an angle, and it ended up coming out right to the south side of where I think the school originally was. I've got 2 different people that, they're both gone now. They didn't like each other, so I know they didn't conspire to get their story straight. And they both, each one described a completely different person. Now, you can't be this tall and come looking for information and then be described as this tall looking for information. 2 different men came to these 2 families looking for the original location of the school, and the consistencies between the stories were, and I've narrowed it down to between 1870 and 1878 due to missing newspapers, because I can't find any mention of this instance in any of the other existing newspapers. So if it's true, it happened when the newspapers are missing. Both of the stories confirm something happened. The kids that walked to school on a fateful morning didn't realize that their parents were sick with something that was contagious. They went to school not knowing they were sick, got everybody else infected. The teacher realized by the time the kids dropped at the end of the day there was a problem. She or somebody locked the door and quarantined everybody, treated them as best they could, and both stories said by the end of 2 to 3 days, everybody was dead. So the parents of the kids came in, the fathers gathered up the bodies, took them across the holler, and on the opposite side, within view of where the school was, they dug a hole, buried everybody, and put a big blue rock on top. Then the mothers and the children stayed there and tended to the grave finished filling it in while the fathers went back across the holler and set fire to the school building. Okay? If any of you farm, I think you'll know not a lot of blue granite rocks came down with the glaciers. Most of them are much smaller than that, and they're generally of a red or gray color. A friend of mine was chasing a coon dog in the middle of the night because she wouldn't obey his commands, like most dogs don't. And in his chasing and trying to catch her, he tripped and fell and ended up eating a mouthful of dirt because he tripped and fell over that rock. And after he got cleaned up and spit the dirt out, he used a flashlight. It's like, honey, that's a blue rock. Is that the one Dalanne's looking for? Dowsing is not an approved, it's not an approved method for locating graves. But if you can do it, if you walk across a body, they'll move. My youngest, way better at it than I am. Mine crossed when I was within 3 feet of that. My youngest went to this stone. I took her back 2 weeks later. She walked around it, and there's an 8-foot diameter circle all the way around it where her rods crossed, and they crossed fast. She believes that there's people buried there, and several of them. I think that's where those kids are buried, and it's enough that Vic lets Eric and Beth makes her husband go down every couple of months with a rake and clean it off. She considers that where those children are buried as well. Like I said, it's one of those, I can't prove it, but I've not seen a blue granite boulder, and to a little kid, both of these men said they were too young to go to school when this happened. Well, if you're somewhere between the ages of 2 and 5, that thing's going to look monstrous. And when I went to look at it, it's a blue granite boulder that's about that big around. Picture something the size of a medicine ball or just a little bit bigger. Okay, done with those. I could not print anything off to bring for you guys to have because my printer hates me at home. So if you want, contact me. I'll be happy to let you write these down, or I'll send you a list of them. Find a grave. It's not perfect because it's only as good as those who submit the data, but it's free. Whenever I go and look up a grave, I look on there, and if there's nobody there, then I put it in. That Schweitzer Cemetery, every grave is in there, even if it's somebody that's unknown, because there's somebody there, and someday somebody might know or have a newspaper clipping that says so-and-so is buried there. Aid Books is an obscure website. I still don't know how I stumbled across it. Books are for sale worldwide. I've been looking for a Feltner genealogy history written by a man and published in 1975. He only produced 125 of these books. Last time I found one, they wanted $400 for it, and it's a 3-inch thick book. It's hefty. I found one for sale by a bookseller in Germany for $100 plus shipping, and he felt sorry for me being in the United States. He only charged me $25. By rights, it should have been significantly higher, and my mother-in-law was shocked when I said, hey, guess what I found? Because it was Marcy's family. She was kind of disgusted to discover that she's not in there because the researcher could not find her great-grandfather because he got in a fight with his dad, and he's like, well, Dad, if you're not going to leave, I guess I will. And he just packed up and left Kentucky and went across the river to Orange County, Indiana, and set up shop and never wrote back to Kentucky. So he had no idea where he's at. I've been able to fill in the rest of that family. USGS.gov. I don't know what to call them other than topographical maps produced by the government. You can get them in different scales. They're kind of pricey, anywhere from $20 to $30 a piece. But if you catch the earlier ones, they've got schools and cemeteries marked. And if you're really lucky, you get one that they've got some churches marked. Mapgeeks.org, they have early maps of Illinois showing the county's development, the rivers, early settlements. Go to these websites and just spend a few hours and explore them, because they've probably got way more than I've ever found. FamilySearch.org is through the Latter-day Saints. Their accounts do it for free. They have so much information available there for free that I could spend a year exploring that site and not find everything. I was never much on using their site, but the more I use it, the more comfortable I get with it. Yes, there's a learning curve. Be patient. It's well worth it. They've got all kinds of books that are out of print that you can, a lot of them you can just open up and read them online. Genealogytrails.com. I forgot that I could go to that page and then copy the address, so I did that. Genealogytrails.com. Once you're there, go to Illinois and then click on Clark County. They've got a lot of information on there that people have submitted. I use their site quite a bit. The IDAIllinois.org digital is the Digital Archives of the State of Illinois. It's not just stuff from Chicago. They've got a lot of books and papers and pictures that relate to our part, which is not Chicago. From Kankakee south all the way to, Cairo.
Well, we have a specific tab on that particular website. So if you're looking for Clark County Digital Archives, Marshall Public Library will have a section under that.
If you're at home, explore that. There's a lot of good stuff there. If you're here, that's good too. Archive.org, it's also called the Wayback Machine. You can find a lot of sites that no longer exist, but had good information, and somebody got smart and screenshotted their information. I don't access it as much as I used to, but they also have some free books on there. They've got a lot of genealogy books that are available on there too. And if you want to transcribe a cemetery, don't just go and start writing stuff down. Make a plan first. Otherwise, you'll end up doing like I've done, and I've wasted a lot of time. Take some graph paper. I don't like using notebook paper when I'm going to the cemetery. I like graph paper because it helps me I indent stuff a lot. Each tombstone starts way over on the left, and anything that they had on the stone gets indented 2 squares. And if I know stuff or I need to make notes that's not on the stone or that's about that person, I go 2 more in. And I stay consistent with that. But I also pick an obvious, logical place to start. Like if you pulled up to a cemetery and you went, well, right here's the only place to park, right there's where you start. You pick the first row and you work consistently, either right to left or left to right, whichever it happens to be. And once you do that row, you do the next row behind it exactly the same. Yes, that means when you get to the end of a row, you got to turn around and walk back, but everybody needs exercise. Write down everything that's on the stone as best you can, and don't forget to walk around the back and jot down if the stonemaker's name is inscribed on the back. They're not on all of them, but a lot of the early marble ones, the makers were there, and there's a lot of people who like knowing, oh, I follow so-and-so, he was a good carver. Well, oh, he made that stone in this one and made this stone over here. So jot that kind of stuff down too. Take your time, and if you have trouble reading a name, take a flashlight or a mirror, something, reflect light, try different times a day, get shadows across the stone. If you use shadows, you can make those letters out. I've had times where I couldn't do that much, but I used cheap foil from Dollar General and a soft paintbrush. If you wrap a piece of foil all the way around a stone and tape it to itself, and then just very gently start like you would do a stencil, just dotting it. You can dent that foil in, and obviously you don't want to have the foil around the stone tight. But if you're real gentle with it, you can get those indentations. Then when you take it off the stone and lay it down, you're not looking at all of the imperfections on the stone, and you're just looking at the letter outlines, and then you can read it. I've done that with a lot out of Marshall. I also found out the hard way, take a chair, or if you've got a garden wagon that the sides fall down on, make sure the tires are aired up good on it, because if you forget to do that, the wagon will drop unexpectedly about 3 inches. Take a chair, take some water, and dear God, if you're doing it in the middle of summer, take some sunblock. I can't count how many sunburns I got doing this. And you need a lap desk, or I got lazy. I went online and bought a $20 music stand. And I just adjusted it, and I used some cheap clamps, clamped my papers to the music where the books would be open. Instant place to hold my pens and pencils, and there's my paper, and I don't have to worry about doing this number. Let's see. Already mentioned the shadows and the foil. Okay, yeah. Granite. Sometimes the granite's really hard to read. Down at Handy, somebody made a granite stone with the 4 Handy brothers. All of their names and birth and death dates inscribed on it. You'd think granite wouldn't discolor. Yeah, that's a lie, it does. But if you spray it with water, it brings the color back, and then you can make out what it says a whole lot easier for pictures. So I highly recommend taking a squirt bottle with some water in it. Whenever I go down to Darwin and Walnut Prairie, I've got a gallon sprayer that my dad graciously purchased a gallon bottle of D2 that's I have to dilute. D2 is, as far as I know, still the only approved biological cleaner for tombstones. You can use it to clean them immediately, but I like to say work smarter, not harder. I'm lazy. You can soak a tombstone that's covered in that black stuff, soak the bejesus out of it, and then go right on about your business. Go back in 3 or 4 months and it'll look a little better. If you want, hit it again. Within a year, all of that black stuff will be gone, and it'll be a nice, beautiful stone again that you hopefully can still read. And that would be it. So, who's got questions? And it's 20 after I hit my mark.
Would you be able to put back up the first screen of websites that you had?
I think so. I really can't say how much I hate bifocals. Yes.
Dalanne, many years ago, my grandfather told me that there were 2 Indians buried out in the Livingston Cemetery. He swore that they were, and he got information from his father, I think. And another individual and I went out there, and we looked, and we didn't find anything that resembled it. But a lot of them, you couldn't read what was on it. Do you know anything about this?
That's not the first time I've heard that. But the other 2 people that have asked me about it, all they knew was it's in the old part, and they couldn't even tell me if it's in the old part on the north side of the church or the south side of the church. If it's true, I take money on a bet that they would probably be buried on the south side of the church, because that, I think, is a little older.
My grandfather also said it was on the south side.
But there's a lot of tombstones that are either gone or have fallen over and are buried well below the grass level and can't be seen. Technically, in Illinois, it's illegal to probe for a tombstone, but my theory is it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission, and you got to get caught first. I have gone to several cemeteries that are in wooded areas where the forest has come up around them, And if you see something that looks like a grave and you're very gentle, if you, my husband loaned me a tile probe. I hate those things. I don't care if they're rubber tipped. I cut a piece of 9-gauge wire and duct taped it to the handle of my hoe. At the time I had trouble walking, still do, but I used my grandmother's hoe as a cane. And whenever I thought I was at a grave, I just flip it end for end and just very gently and slowly start probing until I hit something hard. Instead of going down harder, that's when I would go down on my knees and start digging by hand. And if I found a stone, great. And if it was a rock, I'd usually say a few bad words and go back to my business. But doing that, I found, like at the Fox Cemetery in Anderson Township, I told somebody earlier, I know where there's 3 graves that the tombstones have fallen face down. And Dad and I weren't there to look for those, but we found those 3. Dad helped me turn them over. We cleaned them, took pictures, and then very gently put them back because they were such of the stones that are very tall, only about that thin. And if I'd have stood it up, they would have been as tall as me because 2 feet would have been in the ground. Those were not ever meant to be in a cemetery that's mowed. They were meant to have grass grow up around the bottom because that sod and the grass roots is what held those in place. But out in the woods, they didn't get sunlight. Stuff died. They went face first. I need to go back and get better pictures because I used a 35mm camera and I didn't understand the settings and they're really dark. But you can look for stones, but in a cemetery that's established, I would go and beg help with the sexton or whoever's in charge.
Have you seen the new Dopplers? A lot like they're new, but where they're like on a push cart and it's got a camera and you run them across the cemetery and it shows you a
I've seen those. We just had a discussion about those here a while back in terms of the Hope Cemetery, that they're good for showing ground disturbance, but when you've got graves that are side by side, are you finding an actual grave, or are you finding where the ground's just been disturbed from, so you don't know whether you're really on top of one or not? The individual that was discussing it, in the small privately owned ones that are considered inactive and abandoned, they, with the landowner's permission, will go in and very gently scrape off the A horizon, the very top bit of the topsoil, and they'll go down very gently until they discover the rectangles of disturbed ground. Then they can document where the graves are, and then they put the ground right back. It's very similar to what they did when they found the burials down at the county gravel pit. Except for where somebody accidentally dug into it. They knew there was people there, but I'm just glad I wasn't Scott that day.
Oh, wow.
Anybody else got a question I may or may not know the answer to?
Just to comment back on that Tobneck Cemetery there on Vic Tingley's, all their stones were just big granite rocks.
2 of
Those
them.
2. But then out at the Marshall Cemetery, there's also more of those same rocks, and they have a copper or plate on it with their names. They just kind of had it molded and then glued, I guess, onto the stone.
There's one that's a dark red that I haven't had the time or energy to go back there yet. I think somebody may have tried to chip away and put a couple of initials on the front of the red one, but without actually laying paper or foil over it and, being granite, hit it with a crayon chunk, I might be able to tell if it's just a deformation of the boulder or whether somebody actually did try to put an initial. But all we know for sure is it's Tobneck family.
I'm guessing that Otto, he had the silver mine, and as he was mining in the hillside, he got all those boulders and like, oh, save those for tombstones.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
And dirty rotten old man never told anybody where his silver mine was.
They're still looking for it.
They panned gold on the creek behind Marcy's, and Jim's even gone down with the pan and tried. And he's like, yeah, there's nothing there. I think somebody found pyrite and was just hopeful. But, yep.
So how many people have to be buried in an area before it's considered a cemetery?
That's why I told my husband, if he goes first, he may be lucky if I put him in Zion's cemetery. I may stick him in the backyard.
And hopefully not this week, right?
Yeah, hopefully not tomorrow. We actually have my husband and I are weird, okay, if you don't know me. We got married on a Saturday, and we couldn't do anything about making our wills out the following Monday because the preacher hadn't returned our marriage license at that point, because we were at the lawyer's office at 9 o'clock Monday morning and we're aggravated. So instead we turned around and drove down to Zion, where one of my mom and dad's friends was one of the guys in charge of the cemetery. Instead of doing our wills the 3 days after we got married, we bought our lot. And if you can imagine this, it's the last remaining lot in the old part. So, and my kids all know that I better be put on the south end of it. There's a 5-year-old Finkbeiner child buried right next to us on the north end, and I've got a picture of her, and I don't want to be buried next to her. It's just a little creepy to have a picture of a 5-year-old that... But yeah, 3 Saturdays, and 2 days after we got married, we couldn't do our wills, and instead we bought where we're going to be pushing daisies someday.
I haven't heard of newlyweds doing that before.
You already know I'm weird, so...
And I love you for it. Thank you, everybody. Oh, was there one more question that I had?
Have you done any research on what was an Indian cemeteries in the area?
I know where two... I know of 2 locations, but how do I want to put this? I've recorded them on my computer at home in a file that when I die, my youngest gets, because she's the only one who cares. And she's my mini-me, and she's kind of she's going to be my keeper of secrets. I know where those 2 locations are, but I won't tell people because I don't want to take a chance that some idiot goes and tries to dig them up just for funsies. I've actually done the same with, I know where there's 3 mounds that have not been dug into, and the landowners, we did a handshake on it. Those are not in my computer, those are in my book, and Ruby knows where the book is, and it's currently in a safe. I know where they are because the 2 landowners that know where they are don't have kids, and they don't trust anybody enough to know where those are. They don't want the information lost, but they don't want somebody digging into them either.
Well, can I ask you after the meeting, just about one that I...
You can ask all you want.
Okay.
I mean, I know where there's a lot of them where they were, and they were dug into over the years and farmed over until they're flat, but, you know, there's nothing there anymore. But yeah, I mean, I know where some of that is, but what I do know, I morally and ethically, I won't and can't divulge.
What about these fields where there was old cemeteries and the farmers had removed the tombstones?
Oh my God, don't get me started. There's a reason people say I'm hard to get along with, and that would be one of them, because I have tenderized more than my share of people. there's somebody my age that was gonna take a cemetery out, and I went and basically kicked him in the shin, and bad words were said all around, and by the time I was done, I was holding a stick, and he knew better. So yeah, it is actually trying to get the cops at the state level, or I like our local cops, I really do. But if somebody, even if they caught somebody destroying a cemetery, trying to get them to do anything is like a farce. But it is actually illegal. It is a felony to damage or destroy a cemetery. So yeah, don't get me started, because I could go all night on that.
And Dalanne, just briefly, would you tell us a little bit about the binders here? These are available downstairs. I had alluded the story of, or the history of the Historical Society and the partnership of the Genealogy Society and how they separated, and then was it 3 years ago now? The genealogy collection was donated to the library, and so the bookcases that are along the wall back here, those would be part of the collection that was donated, and then all of the Clark County collections are downstairs behind the children's train depot area, and these are included. And these are cemetery records that you have walked and mapped out for people to, and it's beautiful because there's indexes to them as well. So that makes it especially handy.
The ladies that started the Genealogical Society, they did the majority of the hard work. They walked cemeteries starting in 1971, I think was the earliest date, and they did what they considered the main ones, which was the 64 that were still in use at the time. I've gone through, and then over the years they had other people go and they add the smaller ones. They did them by township, so if you know the cemetery your person's in, you can go to the township and generally find the page. If you know where they're buried, good for you. If you don't, you're kind of SOL, because they were a big believer in alphabetizing the listings. And if you were really lucky, they got lazy and left the wife listed directly underneath the husband's name. They didn't always. So I hate that they did that, and Betty Turner and I usually had bad feelings about each other over that, because she knew that, and she said, well, we knew better, but we were in a hurry. Well, that's not an excuse. Family groups are usually buried together, and if you've got two brothers, or God forbid, two first cousins, and their families buried in the same cemetery, and their alphabet, whose kids belongs to whose? You don't know if there's not initials carved on those stones. That was a sore point. I rewalked Marshall because I didn't have anything better to do at the time, I guess I thought. And I fixed as much of that as I could, trying to put them in, that cemetery is divided into series like A, B, C, and D, and then the lots are numbered. And I would pick a starting point and start with that lot number, and I would try to go, each lot's 2 graves deep for the most part, and I would put those 2 rows and then go to the next lot and the next one. It's not perfect because they can't get people, God forbid they get them squared up. I don't always have everybody assigned the correct lot, but I'm darn close. For people that did that, you can almost walk directly to the graves. But they've got a lot of information. A lot of times I will give the ladies props. They knew a lot of deceased women's maiden names that may or may not have married here, and if they got married elsewhere, but they knew the maiden name, they would add it in, usually not on the tombstone, and they would, if it wasn't on the tombstone, I think they underlined it in most of those books. That's helpful when you go online and you try to find, okay, did they really get married with that maiden name? You usually find them. But they're, for the most part, each township book, they're not all the cemeteries that are in it are not always in alphabetical order. Like Wabash, like Asbury may come right after Denison. So they're not, the cemeteries themselves are not alphabetical necessarily, but it doesn't take too long to go through each book and find the cemetery that you're looking for. I'm sorry, did I get off topic? Was that what you were looking for? I'm sorry, my husband's been home from surgery for Tuesday, and it's been a long week.
And that's why I cracked the joke about not this week, so.
Yeah, this was like, I didn't have to be here until 6:30, and I was parked out front at 5:30.
So my question, this is certainly a labor of love that you've been very passionate about. Now, have we been keeping, like, with technology, does this go up to a certain period and then
I'd be very comfortable saying they're fairly current up to 1974.
Okay.
A very select few. I'm behind on the Zion Cemetery. I will admit I'm guilty as all get out of having my personal favorite cemeteries to try to keep up. I got Marshall up to date to, let's see, Drew was born in 93, so Ruby was in school. Then Marshall's up to date maybe at 2005, and there's been a lot of people added. My health is not the greatest, and I don't have that kind of time and energy. I'll go to the smaller ones.
So, I just am just a fellow president. I've known for years that this is your thing, and I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, we blame Uncle Jack for it.
The question I also have is just that we know we have 1,000 years here plus of Native Americans being born here, but what is the earliest someone from a European extraction being buried
maybe not buried here, but I was just reading that. I'm weird. When I get bored tired reading ebooks, I will pick up the 1883 history and reread it just for nothing else better to do. According to that, the earliest known white man that was here killed somebody in Vincennes in 1815, 1816, and decided to book it out. And he rolled up the river and pitched camp up here. And the Indians decided, well, one man can't do a whole lot, we'll leave him alone. And when the Handies made river fall, he decided, country's getting a little bit crowded, I'm out of here. He packed up and headed west. That man's name was not known, but at the time the Indians were all like, yeah, there was a guy here. The earliest burial would be in the Handy Cemetery, aside from Indians, or natives would be, I guess, a better way to put it. I used to know exactly which one of the Handies was the first one that died here, and right now I can't tell you, but he died in 1819. And I also know, according to that history book, there was a squabble over who was the first white kid born in Clark County. There's supposedly two neighbors, that one had a son, one had a daughter, and they were born within an hour of each other, and then one of the Handy's wives had a baby, and they had them the same night. So, don't know, but there were 3 kids born in the same night, and it was, who's going to throw the biggest rock to win that fight?
And those are featured in the Clark County history books that we have, right? Those stories? Is that?
I don't know if I.
In those
No, I can't remember. I caught enough flack putting Squab Wilson stuff in there.
Okay. And just an FYI, if you come and do research in our local histories and genealogy department, you can get some copies made free of charge. So any of those records, if we've made it so that you can take them out individually, we can help you make some copies if you want to take that home and kind of look at it in more depth, or go, like she was saying, just have it in hand and walk it, so that you can pinpoint certain plots.
One of Bob Maxwell's relatives, and I really miss chatting with Paul. Paul Connor was a frequent flyer, and when he'd get done with his own research, he would grab the pages, copies of pages from a cemetery wherever he felt like driving to the next few weeks, and he would take the list, and then he would rewrite the entire cemetery using the list the ladies did, since 99% of them are alphabetized lists. He would use those as a checklist and go down the rows, and he would number them. And if he found an area where there was either nobody buried or a stone missing but a gap, he would, an average grave is 3.5, 4 feet wide. He would paste that off, so if he got to, say, row 1, grave 5, he did that stone, and then there's 2 gaps, or what would be the equivalent of 2 burials. He would skip numbers 6 and 7, and then carry on with the following number, just in case they discovered somebody was actually in there. Unfortunately, there's not any really good software for recording that information. I use one called, I can't come up with the name of it now, darn it. They don't update the software very often. It exports stuff in CSV, comma valued?
Comma separated values.
Thank you. If you'd have told me when I was in high school I was going to have to become a computer geek, I'd have said you were high. Just to do this, I had to relearn how to do what is this called again?
PowerPoint.
A PowerPoint. I hadn't done one for 7 years.
She did great, didn't she? Let's give her another